to Designated Driver. In this episode, we're going to talk about low Earth orbiting satellites, or as I like to call them, LEOs. We're going to have a conversation around what Elon Musk is doing. You know, he's been shooting up satellites into the sky. And then we're going to have a chat about, well, who's responsible for all these satellites? What are they going to do for us, for you and I? And we're going to cover our usual good, bad, and ugly to do with this particular technology. We'll finish the show with our winch fault. I'm going to pick up my co-host Sven. He's going to try and add some fun and humor to it. I don't know, because I'm the one with the facts. They are meant to be the guys with fun and humor, and they're not very good at it. But we'll see what they do. Good morning, mate. How are you?
I'm good.
Are we corona shaking?
Yeah.
Still. Damn.
There we go.
This thing is just not going away, is it?
It's not going away. And I have a sneaky suspicion we're going to be ending up in a second lockdown. That's what I think is going to happen. Mark my words.
Speaking of your suspicions, what are your suspicions regarding low Earth orbiting satellites? Do you know what they are?
Well, no.
Fantastic.
No, I was going to Google that actually just before we got to the restaurant. We got a few minutes left, so
correct.
We're good.
As long as you're not relying on Rebecca telling you what they are, because you know.
Have we ever relied on her for anything? I mean, yeah. That's
Leos.
Fine. Leos, not Leos. Leo satellites. But the key with this discussion really is three main questions. Right? Who actually owns and regulates space, right? This is not like being on the planet where there's borders, and if you do something wrong within your borders, well, that's fine. Whatever you're doing, everyone's involved, right? Why is that important? Because of the next big question is who looks after space junk? And we already know space junk is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And the third question is who actually benefits from all of this, right? So for example, you know, we've got all these entrepreneurs saying, oh, global internet access and all that, and that's great, but who benefits? Is it the poor farmer in the middle of nowhere who can now call New York? Don't know.
We got to pick up one last person.
Yes.
From the last century.
That is
Rebecca.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
How are
Good
we?
morning.
Being nice today?
Always.
Corona? Still corona shaking.
So, Rebecca, where are we going today?
We are going to the Firehouse, which is a restaurant in Ringwood. It is awesome. It used to be a fire station. One of those things. Didn't see a pole there though. Anyway, the food is really, really good. They do some amazing cocktails.
Simple question. Where are we going? I didn't ask for a biography on the place or a brief history of it.
You should have led with a closed question. Like,
what are the GPS
address?
coordinates of the location we're going?
Why are we going to this place?
Okay, so the owners are awesome, really, really super nice guys. The food is really good. Of course, at the moment, there's a restricted menu because of social distancing and
COVID.
Yes, COVID, that fun time.
I like the term physical distancing.
I actually really like a restricted menu because I don't like too many choices. So they go, well, here's the best stuff we've got. Pick one. I think it's great.
It's really, really nice inside, and they actually bottle their own cocktails too, so you can buy them and take them home.
Which is very handy in COVID because you can't change the world you're in, but you can change the way you look at it.
Welcome to Designated Driver, where ordinary people are talking extraordinary things in technology. And this particular technology is going to impact your life over the next 10 years. What is it? Low Earth orbiting satellites. What is it?
As I like to call it, LEOs. They don't like the acronym.
It's LEO.
LEOs.
There's no Leo.
Leo
Satellite.
and satellite.
Anyways.
Leo, Geo.
Mio.
Yeah, correct. It's effectively a whole bunch of satellites in low Earth orbit. And by that we mean up to 2,000 kilometers away from the Earth. The excitement.
So, hang on, it's a little bit more than that, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of things. What makes it exciting? It's 200 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers is low
Earth orbiting.
I'm not the designated driver here. But what's interesting about that is that, in fact, there's two things, right? One is it's still subject to Earth's gravity. That's the one thing that most people don't get when you're out there in it's still subject to Earth's gravity. And the other thing, it's still also subject to Earth's atmosphere as well. So when you talk about low Earth orbit, it's not your geostationary orbit, which is 36,000 kilometers away. This stuff is very, very close, which means over time, these things slow down. It means over time, they come back to Earth, right? And that's why this is an interesting subject. And just to make it very real, the International Space Station is in low Earth orbit. It's only at 400 kilometers above.
Right.
I'm interested why you mentioned gravity, because even at 36,000 kilometers away from Earth, we still have very strong gravity. Why is that a factor?
Because it's all about...
Gravitational pull.
This is like
That's
Elon
what
Musk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, watch the videos, for goodness sake, right?
Did you do no research again?
This
Did
is a
you do
good
know-
question, because the space-time fabric apparently at 36,000 kilometers doesn't bend anymore.
All right. So if you want to go that far, we might as well talk about the moon. And yes, gravity.
Okay, let's
and
go. Okay, like Leo satellites, not Leos.
Leos.
Yes.
What are they,
Yep.
and what are they doing, and
Okay.
what are we specifically talking about?
So they are small satellites that we want to send out and have been sending out into space for quite some time. And they do things like satellite phones. They spin around the Earth really, really quickly. So they go around the Earth between every 90 minutes, 120 minutes. So they go at a really fast pace. I think it's 8 kilometers per second. And they cruise around. They're very different to geostationary satellites. And what makes them different from an internet perspective, or from how we're going to use them perspective, is that it tends to solve the problem of latency. So latency is something with you when you're working with geostatic satellites is a problem. This is supposed to solve the problem.
So why don't we talk about what most people know, which is SpaceX?
Starlink, yeah.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
Musk.
Yes.
too many, ISO cocktails being let
Yes.
out. So I think we should talk about Elon Musk and Starlink and what that is meant to do, right? I think that gives more context to people in terms of satellite across the world.
Yes.
So Elon Musk is planning on effectively enabling internet access using satellites. He's planning on deploying, 42,000 of them
Eventually.
in
yeah.
the
12,000
low
to
Earth
begin with.
orbit.
With the total.
42,000 in
He's
total. He's got
requested-
approval for.
He's requested another 30,000
And that's
to
going to
make
give us
42,000.
Oh, okay.
Blanket.
42,000. Move on.
blanket coverage across the entire planet Earth.
That we're all linked together.
But the
Hence
question
Starlink.
is, why is he doing it?
Well, according to Elon himself, it's so that he can bankroll taking over the world, is one way of saying
Starship.
it. But basically, he wants to bankroll the
Starship.
Mars thing,
Mars.
right?
Self-sustainable city on Mars and with a station on the moon.
Correct. So if you need $50 billion, then it's a good idea to get involved with the Leo trillion-dollar opportunity of internet access. And internet access is not the way we think about it, browsing the internet. If you're going into a world of autonomous driving, of IoT and all that sort of thing, this is only going to get bigger and bigger. So essentially, it's something we're going to need to have. The question, though, is how much of it we're going to need. I mean, do you need 42,000 satellites just from one company? Multiply that by 2, because you need a competitor, and that's just from the United States. Multiply that by 4 continents, and before you know it, you've got 100,000 satellites streaming around. What happens with all the space junk that goes with it as well? So there's always a positive and a negative that goes with it. And I'm always the guy that points it out, because you never do.
I point out the ugly in all of our episodes, so thank you for paying attention to what I say, Sven.
You do point out the ugly.
So do you maybe explain to our audience the low latency and how that is beneficial?
Sure. So, if you want to transmit data today, the fastest way we have to do it is through fiber links,
Can we
right?
make it more interesting?
Yes, through fiber. But what happens with sending light down fiber is it bounces up and down as it gets reflected. So although light travels at 300,000 kilometers a second, it's going to kind of be slowed down because it bounces off. If you're doing it through space, it doesn't bounce off, no refractive index, it's a whole lot faster. 47% faster.
Then?
Was that too technical?
Yes.
Were you boring?
47%
Always.
faster if we have satellites giving us internet connectivity versus fiber.
So how many people do we have? We've got Amazon, we've got SpaceX, we've got
OneWeb,
OneWeb. there's
Iridium.
another- Yes.
Eutelsat.
So there's a bunch of people that are going to be throwing things in our low Earth orbit. But what is that going to end up with? I mean, are we just going to go nuts? Is this like a gold rush for the internet?
Well, it's supposedly you hear different figures, but it's anywhere between a $1 to $2 trillion business, right, for the next decade. So it is definitely the next gold rush. And you're right, we're going to have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these objects. Keep in mind, there's obviously military use for these as well. being so close to Earth, they have very good
satellites.
high resolution imaging, correct. And they're all going to be covering the planet, which kind of covers, what's the downside of that? Junk would be one.
Space junk, yep, absolutely.
Talk to us about space junk.
Yes, there is 6,000 tons of space junk out there already. As if us humans haven't destroyed this planet enough, we've decided to go outside of our own planet.
Why not?
And
Why
pollute
not?
this space.
Well, we're not exactly sending rubbish out there.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
we are.
But also, I mean, think about what we talk about with rubbish, right? So this is not big space junk. So you can get on the internet and you can have all these blown up pictures of how much junk is going around our planet, and that's sort of sensationalist. But the truth of the matter is, space junk, even as small as chips of paint, for example, and tiny little blown up tiny little pieces of aluminium and steel, and all of those things that we've been launching over the last couple of years, when they're traveling at the velocity of 3 times the speed of a bullet, for example, and they hit the International Space Station, or they hit other satellites, or indeed 2 satellites, which has happened already, 2 satellites hit each other, and then they create all this space junk, that is actually a very big problem. It stops things like spacewalks. It stops further research. The International Space Station itself has to maneuver itself out of its particular orbit to avoid large space.
Correct. If there is a
dangers.
1 in 1,000 chance of a space junk hitting the ISS, they actually have to maneuver outside the potential path
Yeah. So take this
at
to
a huge cost.
Take this to the ultimate level of, if there's so much junk, and we're tracking all of it, and when I say we, it's a little bit of the European Space Station, Space Agency, it's a little bit of NASA, they're all tracking these sorts of
A
things.
whole lot of US military.
They're tracking about 23,000 objects, and these objects are the bigger ones that you can in fact track, but they're not the small ones, right? The ones that can actually cause a serious amount of damage. The issue though that we have is that from a science perspective, remember, no one owns space. No one owns our low Earth orbit. But if you've got companies going out there, just going and putting their stuff out there and not cleaning up after themselves, we could effectively, this is taking it to the next level, we could trap ourselves on planet Earth where we can no longer launch things out into space without significant risk of having it destroyed on the way out. And that's diametrically opposed to what our friend Elon wants to do around getting to Mars, right? If we can't get out of our own planet because we're in our own rubbish heap, well, that's no good at all.
I think a bigger threat, though, in terms of timeline at least, is our inability to observe the universe, because we've just got too much junk in front of our telescopes and the radio telescopes.
So what is it? It's like a magnitude of 2 they're predicting.
Of
Light.
interference?
Yeah, of light. But I think it's only been proven to be 5 or at a minimum of 7, which is not really anything at all.
Well,
2's bad.
2's bad, right? When you're trying to get the clearest, furthest pictures, obviously from Earth, that's troublesome anyway, just because we're polluting our
From
atmosphere.
Earth, you'll see 2. If it's a 7, well, it doesn't really matter.
Well, the thing is, once when you start looking at the Hubble telescopes and the other telescopes that they want to put out into space to get better pictures, it's still, again, subject to space junk.
Yes.
And this brings, I guess, me to the subject of who's regulating this. And the bottom line is no one's really regulating it. It's just a free fall at the moment, and there are dollar signs. I mean, it is a gold rush because there's a lot of gold to be had.
That's a good point, because, go on. I don't want to interrupt what you were saying.
It is a good point. I was going to say, let's move into answering the questions. Unless your comment was outside of answering those questions.
What is the question? Because my comment was probably spot on answering the
What was
question.
your question? Because I'll just do this.
You can't ask a question yourself and press the button.
Okay,
That's
you
just...
bore me. Who does this benefit? I read this legal paper. What was said in there was an African village could call at a very, I think it was a reasonable price, an office in New York.
It's
Well, that's
$1,000
No,
for a
I'm sorry,
Starlink antenna.
Yeah, but can we just take a step back for can I just
No, but
let's just look at this,
that's
right?
a great thing.
No.
There you are
But-
in
but-
Africa.
But you're in a village in Africa.
Yes.
Do you care about calling an office in New
Why
York?
wouldn't you want to call New York? There you are in another drought.
Because you want to trade on the New York Stock
It
Exchange.
doesn't make sense. So the people, like the way that I'm seeing it, right? Yes, okay, first world, like pretty much everyone's going to benefit from low latency, high speed internet. Talk about what we said earlier around Starlink is literally just making the money to do Starship. Why are we pumping money into going to another planet when we're not looking after people on this planet.
Cycle of discussion as to why we're trying to populate other planets when we can't even look after our own, why we're spending money on space travel. And the counter argument from the scientists and the adventurers would say to you two things. They'd say it's part of the human condition to always go to the next frontier. It's just what we kind of do, come what may. And the other is they would tell you that there's a whole bunch of scientific things that come out of these explorations that benefit humans. Does it benefit the right humans? No. It's not going to save the planet. I personally believe we should probably relook at how much money we're throwing out at all these sorts of things and look at maybe we should just sort things out over here. But at the same time, we have to continue the human condition, which is exploration and scientific advancement. Because
It's
ultimately
really
that
easy
helps
to say
humanity.
that when you're a middle-class white
guy.
man in a
It's true.
first world country.
You're spot on. You're spot on. And this Starlink and all the rest that are going to go there, no person in the middle of Africa going through another drought and
It's
trying
not going to help them.
if they could phone an office in New York versus get a whole basket full of corn grain
Yes.
or I'm giving away my middle class whiteness. But at the end of the day,
Your farm skills.
my farming skills. But really, it's not going to help them. The internet's not going to help
So
everybody.
if we go on to the next question, which was around regulation,
Yes.
who regulates space? What is the answer to that?
There is no single entity regulates space. The country that launches a spacecraft is responsible for it. I was going to talk about, for example, Starlink. 95% of their satellites will burn up in the atmosphere before they hit Earth, but
According
that
to
leaves
their
5%.
calculations.
Correct.
Yeah.
It still leaves 5%. 5% are 42,000. That's a big number.
Yep.
And if it hits you in the head, or if it hits your house, in theory, if they've been launched from US is responsible. But, and there's a 1972 UN Convention on International Liability for Damage Caused by Space Debris. But the problem is, the country, so if you're in Australia, the Australian government needs to effectively sue the US government
We all know
for
how
a
well
damage
that
that.
goes.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
So
it's
when
not
these
just that.
things fall on your head, you're on your own.
Well, you're talking about things falling out of the sky, but things are being blown out of the sky as well. So there's examples of the United States, China,
Yeah.
India using missiles to basically destroy either redundant satellites and all that sort of thing. Now, the problem, of course, with that is they're not really practicing on redundant satellites. They're actually just showing off their prowess in
Yeah.
military capability, their prowess in space capability, and it's basically just a silent little arms race to say, look, we can also aim for a speeding bullet with a speeding bullet, and we're part of the big boys club. We get that. But the consequences of that, and this is what India did in 2019, just last year, basically going, well, we've just destroyed a satellite. By doing so, however, they created a single satellite, which is its own problem, into 400 tiny little pieces of satellite, which will take 2 to 5 years to eventually come in and burn up. And they didn't, of course, announce this because this is not something you announce before the fact, you didn't announce it after the fact. And again, this is a problem. So, there's another solution to this, can you believe it? But no one likes the solution, and here's why. Another way to get rid of redundant satellites, because they have a shelf life of about 5 to 7 years before they roll back.
The Leos do, yes.
Yeah. The what's
The
that?
Leos.
The Leos.
Low Earth
Yeah,
orbit
yeah.
satellite.
Yeah. Another way to do it, and that's by using lasers, right? And what they do basically is they point this big-ass laser up to a satellite, not enough to obliterate it, but enough to slow it down. And by slowing it down, they basically take it out of its low Earth orbit,
Yeah.
and it rolls back into Earth and
That's
burns up.
interesting. How would you slow it down with lasers? That's cool.
Yeah, it's well,
You should have researched.
you should have done the
Yeah, but
research.
how would you do
Follow
it?
the links on the website, Speedo.
Follow the links.
Totally. But the problem with that is it's a bit like nuclear warfare, right? By being able to develop this kind of technology, it's also a technology for warfare as well.
We're kind of answering the question of space junk at the same time.
Yes. What was the question?
The answer is there is no real solution. And if one of those
There's no
pieces
regulation.
of space junk falls on your house, you're pretty much on your own.
Yeah. Even if you could regulate things, you still have rogue states. You still have rogue elements within states. So it's
So
it's
this
a free
kind of
fall.
takes us to the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think the good is.
Now, there's a little bit of good. There must be
You
good.
know my answer. So the Internet of Robotic Things, when you talk about flying microbots, right? And we spoke about this, like or swarm bots,
Yes.
where they could potentially go and create a shelter for homeless people in remote areas or so forth. Or there's a hurricane, and then you've got autonomous robotics that are building sandbags.
Yep. Or
Right.
looking for dead people.
Yeah,
Who
low
aren't dead yet.
latency, fast internet speeds, way in the future. But that kind of stuff is quite cool.
What's the bad?
So the bad really comes down to what I've been saying throughout this, which is nobody owns this space. There's no borders in space. So whatever
Right.
one company or government does in space affects us all. And without having regulation, it's very difficult at these early stages to be able to say, guys, not only do you have to be responsible for the stuff that you put in space, but you have to be responsible to retrieve it as well.
Ugly.
The ugly.
bag.
Well, it's an interesting one because Sven mentioned how we might actually trap ourselves on planet Earth. And that's a problem if we are maybe, I don't know, a few hundred years in future. But I think in the immediate term, another topic that Sven mentioned was that sense of discovery and voyage that we have in our DNA effectively. Is what are we blocking from our own view by putting all this junk in space? What do we miss out in the immediate term in terms of discovery by having all this space stuff flying around?
I guess what it always comes down to, every time we talk about the good and the bad, the ugly, is if the benefits outweigh the perceived risks, we just keep going. That's how we've done everything throughout time immemorial. And at this stage, it looks like, from what you all read, is that the benefits still outweigh the negatives.
But it's like plastics in the ocean or carbon emissions.
We don't have
you
a
don't
good
know
track
until you
record.
know
Spot on.
how bad it is.
But
We actually agree on something.
we don't have
Let
a
this
good
be
track
recorded
record.
in history.
It's recorded. We don't have a good track record as a humanity of actually being sustainable. We just generally don't do it.
Alrighty, and that concludes to the whinge file. So, I'm up first.
Why did you go first, Beck?
Because I always go first. Whinge file is myself because I didn't do a whinge last time. I was like in this cage for too
Pathetic.
long in
I'm
ISO.
just going to remove this so that you can go on and on about this because this is a really good winch actually. I'm just going to make sure nobody hits it. Please, the next 10 minutes.
Actually, and just stop talking about COVID-19.
Oh, that's two winches.
Whatever.
No, you can't do that.
You can do two
Sven.
whinges. You can make up for last week.
No, she already whinge about herself.
Well, I didn't have a whinge last time, so it's like now
You've got
I'm
to try
even.
harder.
Sven,
Boom.
My whinge is way, way bigger than Beck.
Wait.
Is it? That's a good question.
Is it the same thing?
But my whinge is God. Okay. I don't want to pick on anyone that you might not know. But here's why my whinge is God. Okay. Because think about the circumstances under which he or she operates. Right. If good things happen, everyone goes.
Oh, she bad.
If good things happen, it's like, oh, thank God, wow, a good thing happened, right? But when bad shit happens, it's like your fault, or our fault, or somebody else's fault. You put anything under those circumstances, and you can't fail. That's bullshit, right? Like, I'd love to have a job interview and go, I'm God, how are you doing, right? And they go, well, tell us what you do. Only good things.
thank you, Sven.
Okay.
My whinge is, and it's related to a conversation I had with potentially an ex-friend, but it's around confirmation bias.
Is that ex-friend sitting here?
Because we were never friends. Just an FYI.
Confirmation bias. It's effectively where you actively search out for information that confirms your wrong views on things.
According to you.
According to data.
Right.
Hence confirmation bias.
And I'm bored. So,
You're going to have to Google confirmation bias.
like the episode, didn't like the episode, want to have a comment on Leo satellites,
Leos.
have a whinge, we've got plenty more to come. Go to the Firehouse, it's a great place. We introed it in the car. Really good cocktails, trust me. You want to come
we
here,
have no
eat.
idea.
We had a great lunch.
If you hate this episode, check out the bloopers because they're generally better.
Way better.
More better.
Hey DG viewers, well, this is your whinge and your comments, and it's going to be a combined whinge comment, and it is around the board button. So, what is it? Why do you press it so much? And I want to hear the end of what that person had to say. And I have to apologize because I forget you don't spend as much time with us as we spend with each other, which you'd understand why we press the board button so much. It is the "you're inappropriate" button, "you've gone too far" button, "your voice annoys me" button. And I know that's really selfish, and that's why I started the Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and if we go back to the 90s, email as well. You can get all the links at ddseries.com, and you can message us and ask us what our comment was or what the end of the point was. We'd be more than happy to share that with you. If you want to know more about where the button came from, it actually...
He's my friend Randy B and I, so we talk a lot, and he's always pushing the crap chat button. But actually, so am I. It's basically going on, and he just works it over. It could be something as boring as, I went to the supermarket and this is the price of capsicum. Crap chat button. And so, actually before that came from Shell and Toby, who used to put the crap chat button on each other. And it's always like our friends know that we're boring because the network drops out sometimes. Maybe he's hanging up on me. It's not very nice. So whenever we spend, and trust me, it can just get too much sometimes. So I used to just hit the table, boring. And then hence the more button.
So now you know where it came from, and you can, leave us any questions or comments or whinges, and we'll play it at the end of the next video. Take care.